You're listening to Start Again with Shaunna Lee, the place where you will be reminded that it's never too late and you're never too old to do the damn thing. So stick around if you're ready to vibe higher and be inspired to chase your dreams. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. I am again bringing you a new friend to meet today, Deb Schell. We are going to talk all about building communities, her podcast, the books she's written. I am so excited to jump into this conversation. Deb, thank you for joining me.
It's so good to be here. I'm excited, Shauna. I can't wait to dive in and talk about community building because it's like my favorite thing.
Awesome. Listen, I will have questions for you from a selfish nature, but I will try my best to keep my audience at the forefront of what we're doing here. So let's give them all a little intro, who you are, what you do, but specifically if you can kind of frame it with the idea of how you've embraced starting again.
Yeah, I've started again a couple times in my life, and this is no different. I'm a community strategist and consultant, and what that means is I help people build online communities through developing an online strategy, and that just means like how are we going to launch? When are we launching? What's the structure look like? How many people? Who are we inviting? All of that fun stuff. And I've been doing that since 2020. And I keep having to start over again in a lot of different ways of like, because community is constantly changing all the time, the ways of
Yes.
building community. And that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years, specifically on the Mighty Networks platform. I don't know if you're familiar with Mighty
I
Networks.
am. Yeah.
That's where I started in. So I'm platform agnostic, but my background is from that platform.
Gotcha. Okay. Maybe a little intro. I know what it is, but maybe for some of the other listeners, a little intro to what that is.
Sure. Mighty is a platform for community builders. It has course capabilities. So if you wanted to sell online courses, but the big thing that differences between Mighty and other places is that they really focus on the community component, which is really great for learning because nobody wants to learn alone, and learning together is a lot more fun. So I think that their platform with the engagement things that they have, that they keep changing and updating all these amazing features and functions. It's just a really cool place for, and it's very visual. So if you're like me, who is a creative and likes pretty pictures and graphics and things like that, that's kind of where they're really expert at. But I always say it's not the platform, it's the people. Community is about people, not the platform. So we can get into the techie stuff and we can chat about it, but at the same time, we have to first think, okay, but what's the purpose? And so
Yes,
that's typically what I always return back to is what's the purpose?
exactly. My last conversation that I just had was all about your why and kind of what is your purpose in life and kind of letting that frame your decision-making process and where you go next. So this is a great continuation of that conversation. I love it. Well, okay, so tell us a little bit about your book. What inspired you to write it?
Yeah, so my book is called Creator to Community Builder Finds Calm While Building an Online Community. And the find calm part is because I have a business called Find Calm Here. And that's on the basis that I wanted to help my clients kind of find calm in this process of community building. And I had been, when I started to build online community, it was stressful for me with the tech, but also with just what's the right structure? How do I do this? And through working with like, I guess, over 80 business owners at this point, I've learned that there's some really great ways, but there's unlimited potential. So I wanted to give somebody a framework, basically clients that had come with me said, I wish you had like, just tell us what are like the basic great things to do in community building. So I wrote the book for my clients as a workbook so that they could have it at their desk by the ready whenever they're like, what should I do in this one instance? And they can pull it open. And it's 12 succinct chapters. It's really easy to read. It's not super long. And it's really giving you as the reader the ability to ask, and there's a lot of prompting questions there to help you and guide and navigate you to that purpose, and for you to understand why is the reason that I'm building this, and why are people going to want to join this? Because we have to think about how people are going to, if they're saying yes to you, they have to say no to something else. And so how do we get them, not get them, but how do we inspire others to want to connect and create belonging in community? And so that's what this book really does talk about. It talks about my personal experience, because initially I had been a member of an online community. I had been looking for online business people in 2016, 2017. Couldn't really find anything locally. I didn't really know anybody locally in my area in Pennsylvania here that was building community online. And so, or building a business online. So I was looking, and I found a website called Location Indie, and they had a whole community with a lot of online courses around how do you build businesses online. And so I joined that community, and over 2.5 years, I built an online business, and I decided to quit my corporate job. And I met them in person in Denver. I flew to Denver to meet them, and then I
That's
flew
fun.
to Mexico, and I met them in 2019. And so it was such an amazing experience that a lot of the book shares these little tips that I thought that this community did really, really well to create an experience for their ideal members.
Yeah, and I can see also how community has changed. So I think, a few episodes back I talked about depression and how people think it's a happiness issue, and really it's a connection issue. And especially coming out of the pandemic, we had all of these people disconnected from their family and their friends. And so I have witnessed a real big shift to connecting with community and building community over again in some situations since the pandemic. But I'm just curious kind of if you're seeing the same thing and what your response to that is.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I definitely have different people that I'm interacting with than before the pandemic. There's a lot of reasons for that, but I think we found a lot of people, I know I did, went through this kind of like identity of like, who am I spending my time with? Now that I get like, I'm thinking here, we're all kind of stuck in our houses, thinking about, that we can't go to events that we used to go to, our favorite things. And we're thinking, well, what do I really like? And what do I really want to do with my life? And how do I want to spend my time? And I loved that outcome came from the pandemic, because I think it set a lot of people up to provide themselves with a more intentional life that they wanted to create. And so I think what that means is people are recognizing we change when something is not cool, when we're not happy, when we're sad or depressed. It's a signal. It's telling our
Yes.
body and our brain is saying something's not right. You're not feeling good because something isn't aligned right in your life, and you have to figure out what that thing is to change it. And so in this last couple of years, we've had some time maybe, and there's just different things that have happened with technology that have allowed us to connect with people that we never would have talked to before. I know people in 17 different countries or something. Like, I never would have talked to those people
Yeah.
had I not started to just have Zoom calls for 8 hours a day during the pandemic, and just really spending time in community with other people, because we had the time to build relationships. And I think that then led to saying, okay, I want to spend time with more people like this or whatever, like people that are
Yes.
doing what I'm doing. So I think that's why the community culture is going to be the future of community, because thinking about how we used to connect and now how we're going to connect, we get to choose. I don't
Yes.
think there was a lot of choice before, and I feel like now we have opened up the gates to like all of this amazing stuff, and we can say, okay, I get to choose who I'm going to spend my time with, and those people could help me in an online community change my own life and bring
Absolutely.
myself happiness and support me
Absolutely.
along the way. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your podcast.
The community strategy podcast I had started in 2020. Basically, when I had a community, when I first launched, I was an event. I'm an event person. I love live calls and being live with people. And so I had over 30 virtual events scheduled in 2020. And some of the members were saying, hey, we can't get to the events. Would you do a podcast? Even though I had recordings, they were like, we'd like it if you did a podcast. So I'm like, I don't really want to do a podcast, but maybe I'll think about it. And that's what started it was just me saying, okay, well, here's what I'll do. I was recording previews of the event with the speaker. And so that's how I started the podcast. But then it ended up morphing into business strategy. And then it ended up really getting clarity on community strategy. And so I did over 100 episodes in the what I call the first season, which is 2020 to 2022. And then I paused on the podcast because I wrote my book, Creator to Community Builder, in 2023, which got published in September of 2023. And then I returned back to the Community Strategy podcast and decided to do seasons because you can stop. You can decide on when to stop. There's not an ongoing thing. So
Yes.
I decided for season 2 to read excerpts of my book, Creator to Community Builder, because I don't have like an audio version. And there's a lot of people that want
Oh,
an
yes.
audio version. And I said, well, I can do this and you can listen to the podcast and you'll get the book audio version-ish for free, because basically everything, all the chapters, I've basically
Oh,
read the
yeah,
excerpts.
that's brilliant.
Well, it was a suggestion from my book coach when I was in a book author community, because I had joined a book author community to help me through this book launch thing.
Yes,
And
yes.
he said, you should really do that if you're not going to do the official audible or whatever. And
Yeah.
I was like, but I have dyslexia and I hate reading in front of other people.
That,
So that's a thing. And he's like, well, you should do it and then just tell people that. So that's what I did.
oh,
So
I
I
mean,
made,
let's be transparent and authentic. That's
as
what people
yes,
want.
I know. So I faced my fear and read out loud in my book.
I
So
love it.
that's season 2. And then and that's like 12 episodes because the book is 12 chapters. And then I think I did like a bonus episode, and that was recorded when I did my book launch initially. It was to help get the word out about my book in the fall of 2023. And then just recently in March of 2024, I relaunched the podcast for season 3. And this is now focused on community builders with purpose, which is also the name of the community that I opened a new community this year in 2024 called Community Builders with Purpose. So it's interviews with
I
people who have done events through our community throughout this year.
Yeah. I love this. Mostly because I love how one thing that you were scared to do led to another thing that maybe you were a little scared to do led to another thing. And it's like we just build our confidence as we go. I and you said a couple things that validated what I always say, which is we can always change our mind. Like, start the damn podcast. You can change the purpose of it. You can change how many episodes you do in a season, whether or not you have seasons, whether or not you have themes. Like, nothing is decided. This is your little baby. You can do whatever you want with it.
I know. Isn't that crazy? It's like
It is.
there are no rules. People, maybe people will say something, but whatever. Who cares? This is my podcast. This is for you today. This is your podcast, and you get to
Exactly.
determine, when it starts, who you have as guests, and all that fun stuff, which is really empowering. Honestly,
Oh, it is.
it's just an amazing thing, and it's just there's no other medium that you get to really speak authentically and also connect with people on a deep level in their ear.
Yes.
And it's just such an amazing thing. I like podcasting, and I had a past experience in journalism. My background is in photojournalism. I was a newspaper reporter and worked freelance online editing and writing stories in the past. And so when I went to do interviews, it was easy for me because I had already interviewed
You had
like
already been doing it.
politicians and police. So anybody else is like,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is easy compared to these people that don't want to tell me stuff.
You know, it's funny. I'm such a risk taker that I'm a jump right in and let's figure it out as we go kind of a person, which wigs a lot of people out, by the way. And even to witness me doing it is weird for them. But it's interesting because I'm like that, I haven't even thought to be nervous about interviewing people. I had someone ask me like, well, let's see. This may be season 4 by the time we are launching this episode, but we're like so far multi seasons into this podcast that I think it was probably the beginning of season 2. And they were like, how did you learn how to interview people? And I'm like, what do you mean? I just ask questions. Like I made up the questions. I decide where we go with the conversation. They were like, well, did you get trained on the proper way to interview? And I was like, oh my God, there's probably someone teaching people how to interview people. And I'm just out here winging it. And I'm like,
The only thing I can tell you is when I was in journalism, and if I didn't come back with all of the information, my editor would say, you need to go back and ask more questions because you didn't ask enough. And so
yes,
that's when I learned to like make sure that I'm asking every possible question that I could possibly think of at the time of the interview. And sometimes if I forget, then I have to go back and say, hey, I forgot to ask you this or that. But yeah, it's a lot easier to do it on a podcast when people want to talk.
it's true. It's true. When you're interviewing someone who's like, let me tell you my story, it is a little bit easier
Yeah.
than other scenarios. I am sure. I am sure. Well, okay. So, in this journey of yours from journalism and this past professional experience into this world you live in today, where you're teaching people how to create communities, what do you think has surprised you most?
Uh, Surprised me most. Probably the it's something I did, but also something a lot of people do. Is not really talk to people. And when I say talk to people, what I mean is we have this assumption and we make a lot more assumptions like, oh, I'm going to create a community and everybody's going to love this idea. It's the best idea ever. And it's going to be the best community ever. Right. So if I just put it out on social media and blast it everywhere and tell all of my friends about it, they're all going to want to join my community. No,
That's not how it works.
sorry. Nope. It doesn't work like that. And the other thing is like having a membership when you don't have an audience or like you haven't talked to people. And so I think a lot of the work that I do is talking to people about their ideal members. And just like we talk about ideal clients in a business,
Yep.
businesses solve problems and so does a community. And so community isn't always the solution. So we have to make sure it's the right solution for the problem. But also we want to think about, well, what else is possible here? And how else can we support each other and cultivate this sense of belonging and stuff. But a lot of people don't think about that. Most of the time when we hear about memberships right now, there's a lot of marketing that's talking about, you can make $10,000 a month by having this membership or
Gosh, who decided this is the figure, by the way? Everyone's touting this $10,000 a month figure. Like this is
it's the it's the same people who say six
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 figures.
figures.
Yes, everywhere.
which is BS, you know what I mean? Like,
It's so
yes, people
prevalent.
can make money, but no, it is not this easy. And there is no easy thing. And community is a long-term game. That's the other thing. I have clients that'll say, hey, so you think I can make that $10,000 a month, like in the next 6 months? With no prior experience to like talking to people about this community that you want to build. I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because people have to understand why they're giving their money, their time, and their energy to spend time in a community. And it's about people. So you can predict a
Yes.
lot of things that aren't about people, but people are unpredictable and we
Yes.
can want them to do so many things, but that's not reality.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really good. Well, and live and learn. We gain wisdom as we go and kind of, most of the people who are out teaching any one thing, it's because they learned the hard way and they want to save other people some pain.
For sure.
So, if you were looking back to the younger you and you wanted to save her a little bit of time or trouble, what advice would you give her?
Talk to people. Like not just on Facebook or Instagram, but literally send messages to people and say, I'd like to talk to you on the phone. I have your number. Can we meet for coffee? Something where you're actually talking to these people and understanding what's their problem. And is this community concept that you have, is it going to be the solution? And if it is, do they want to be a part of a community? Because that's the other thing. It could be a really great solution and it could be a really great community concept. But if the person is like, I don't want to lose weight in a group with a lot of people,
Right. Right.
no, then they're not that right fit for that right group and that specific situation. They might want personal. A lot of people right now need personal service. They want somebody who's talking one-to-one, you and me. And well, that's great. I love doing the one-to-ones. Not everybody loves that. And
Yep.
it's time consuming. You only have a couple of, so many hours in the day. And depending on
Yes.
what your life looks like, that's going to change. So I think the biggest things is to think ahead about what your life is right now. Like I've had a client being like, I want to launch the week that I'm going to be in Hawaii. And I'm like, why?
Why?
Why would you do that? Like when you're away, there's a thing that entrepreneurs, and this is it's like I've heard it from other people. In fact, the community that I was in, the leaders, they talked about this too. And I think it's like an entrepreneur thing of like wanting everything to run without you.
Yes.
And that could be true for businesses in general. There's other businesses where you can hire people and have them do things. Community is not that. Community is that I'm involved and I'm active and I'm showing up. And so I think those are the distinctions. A lot of people don't realize, they think it's a passive thing and it's actually a very active thing. And so those are the key things I would say to people is it's not passive, it's active.
Yes, there is a big draw and lots of attention right now to this idea of passive income. I definitely like the minute you say you're a coach, the people come out of the woodworks to help you with your coaching. So there's all this, do more with less, make lots of money with less hours.
Yeah.
And I think that's where some of that I want to launch while I'm on vacation kind of mentality comes from. Yeah, it makes sense. But yeah, community is about connecting and you have to be able to participate to connect.
Yeah. Now, if you have money and you have a budget and you've been in business for 10 or 20 years, and then you decided to have this as an additional offering to what you're already doing, and you wanted to create a space for your past clients or future clients to connect with each other, whatever, that's different. Then maybe you have somebody that runs the community for you. Maybe you have a dedicated community manager, but those things take, money.
Yes.
So it's not, most of the people I work with are either solo entrepreneurs or they have like maybe, a virtual assistant or maybe a small team. And that means that they have to do it differently than these maybe other people who have
Yes.
these big budgets and have the capabilities to do things. There's nothing wrong with either way. It's just about fitting in the right way for you and your life as a host and considering the member experience. Because I think that's what a lot of people miss is they focus so much on like the host and what is my experience as a host versus, oh, but and then they always worry about value and they contribute value to content, which people will tell you they're there for connection. And
Yes.
even though they might have a course and yes, they might be learning and there might be some PDFs or some instructions or some videos that they're watching, at the end of the day, they still want the accountability of a group to help them keep going in that course so they don't quit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're talking through that, I'm thinking of the two communities that I am involved in through Mighty Networks specifically. And there is some of that is missing, is what I'm going to say. As you're talking through it, I'm like, yeah, there's not a whole lot of connecting with the other community members. There's a lot of information being shared. It's connection with the host on a regular basis, so you feel more connected to their business and what they're providing. Yes, to the online courses being in there. It simplifies information. It does all of that, but the one piece that I've seen in the one community, not the other, being requested is really how do we connect with our other members that are here? Like, I want to be able to go talk to, Amy over there about this comment she made, and there's no way for us to connect with each other or even to ask questions directly. And so I can see how that's a difficult challenge to overcome when you're contemplating kind of building this community. I'm going to give you a good working example to ask your advice on. So, a couple years I've been doing this podcast now, and I have been selfishly just really enjoying all these conversations that I get to have. Like I get to meet really neat people and hear how they've lived their lives. And then I get to hit record and share the conversation, which is super fun. But there have been so many times where I'm like, oh my gosh, this guest needs to meet that guest. And it's not really from a matchmaking perspective, but it's more about like building this community of these people that I am attracting into my world. I don't know what to do with them, but I want to connect them. And I'm like, I don't even know if, and I've looked at Mighty Networks actually, and they're quite expensive. So, my business is not to the like ability to sustain that just yet. But what would you say to somebody in that situation? Like, I've got all these people, I want them to know each other. How would I meet that need?
I'll answer a couple ways. You don't need a platform to connect people. Obviously,
Yep.
if you wanted to, you need a phone number or an email address, and you could say, hey, we're going to meet at the
Yep.
coffee shop, or hey, we're going to all jump on a Zoom call on Fridays. So it could be as simple as that. Or it could be as complex as like, I'm going to build out an ecosystem online. One thing I want to go back to is something you said in the first chapter of my book. I write about an empire versus an ecosystem. And one of
Oh,
the things that I distinction, and Pam, I don't know if you know Pamela Slim, she's the author of several books, but she and I had a conversation on my podcast. And one of the things she brought up was this idea of an ecosystem versus an empire. And when you're talking about the host directly, everybody's showing up for the host, the person who's like running the community.
yep.
That's like an empire system because you're not getting that all of those people in the room, but we don't know what their wisdom is. We don't know what their
Yeah.
experience is. And
Right.
so when you talk about an ecosystem, now we're saying, okay, I'm here. I'm here to support the conversation and facilitate a great conversation. I want to make sure we stay on track with our goals or whatever we're trying to do and get accomplished. But I want to hear from you because you have a life that's completely different than mine. Wherever we come from or whatever we do, you have different experiences. And that means that you can bring something to the table that I don't have. And
Right.
so that's why an ecosystem is an amazing spot. So when I relaunched the podcast this year, I really wanted to focus on trying to bring in some of these people who have been listening to my podcast into this community and say, hey, here's more resources. Let's connect with each other. If you're listening to the podcast, then let's talk about it. If you're reading the book, let's talk about it. So I've been working to do that intentionally. And I think that it takes intentionality to
Yes.
do that. And so one of the things I would say is there's different ways to structure that. One thing I did this year was a mastermind that I ran for free in my community for a few months. It was, we met once a month. And then I would have like a breakout room in the Zoom call. And each person would get to meet a different person each month. And so they would talk and get to meet each other like for 5 minutes in a breakout room. We would come back, we would talk about some things, and then they would get to connect at least, they were supposed to connect at least once or twice between the next month. And that gave them an accountability for each other. And they were also able to support each other because they were all community builders. And so they're all doing the same
Yes.
sort of thing. And so they were relevant to each other. So there's intentional ways that you can bring individuals together, that you can structure something, you can invite them to come. And Mighty Networks, if you do decide to do Mighty Networks, or if other people, if you're listening and you're thinking about using a platform like this, that does have really great features. One of them is people magic is what they call it. But basically it's where you can click on the member tab and then there's little bubbles that come up with people's pictures. And then if you click on the picture, it tells you like a little bit about them. And then you can see who's like similar to you, basically, who's got the similar maybe interests or skills or, whatever, like they're in the same courses as you. So you can get to see who is in this community. And I think a lot of hosts that have a Mighty don't necessarily focus on that members area. And there's a lot of benefit to utilizing that feature, that I think when I talk
Yeah.
with clients, I find that they're not really utilizing that. And that's the gold stuff. That's exactly where we want people to be. That's the magic. That's where we want our members to connect and meet each other. But it doesn't happen on its own. That's the
Yes.
thing. My clients are like, well, I thought they would just like, I just open up this space and say, hey, let's talk. And then they're just supposed to talk. I'm like, but think about this. If you're in
Like
a
hosting a
room,
party. That's not how it
yeah,
works.
if you go to a party and like you host a party and then you invite all these people who don't know each other, and then all of a sudden
Exactly.
you're just like, so go ahead and talk, everybody. They're going to be like, what are we talking about? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then they'll just go into the boring, what I do. And that's not fun either. So
Right.
let's talk
Right.
about something that we enjoy. Let's make community fun again. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I love to do, is talk about like, how can we make it fun for the host and for the members? Because if it's not fun for me, it's not going to be fun for y'all because that exudes out. I've been in communities where you can tell that the host is like either overwhelmed or stressed or something. And
Yes.
it comes out. It does. So I think figuring out how to do the other thing that I'll tell you is less is more. And I think a lot of what I do with clients when they come to me and they say, we don't have engagement, I'm like, well, you probably have a lot of things happening at the same time. And then they have to choose on where their attention goes. And that choice might just say, I don't have time for this. I got to go. And they might not ever come back. So I think the less maybe choices you have in the beginning when you're starting out, to have just a focus and to say, here's what we talk about. Because I think that's the other thing. A lot of people are like, I want to help everybody. And we know
Yes.
that everybody who is not your client, you've got to know who your ideal members are. And even if you're just exploring that and trying that out, it's just a matter of being able to say, okay, we're going to talk about the same thing here, because what other communities are out there? There's all kinds of other communities that are competing for their attention too.
It's true. And so I guess when you are looking at different potential clients, what type of business owner does it make sense for them to build a community?
I think the service businesses for sure, or product businesses, are really helpful. So for one example, people that have a coaching business, a coaching program, maybe they have a 6-month coaching program or a year-long coaching program, and they want to bring people together to do group coaching. That's a great opportunity because we can all learn from each other. Maybe we're all trying to, like, for example, building a business is a great thing to bring together people, because it sucks to build a business by yourself, because I've done that. We all sit, there's so many people that sit there and like they're doing all this stuff by themselves and they're like, this sucks. And it's like, we're afraid to like find out if there's other people doing this thing too. But if
Yeah.
we're brave enough to say, okay, who else is doing this thing called building a business online, and we seek it out, then we can find that, oh, they're not so different than me, and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So I think those kinds of solutions. I always joke about the taco night, like having a taco night. If we wanted to have a taco night, we wanted to all talk about tacos, and you're making your tacos at home and I'm making my tacos, and then we're all talking about tacos. And that's a fun thing that, you know what I mean? Like, it's something that we can all enjoy. And we like to talk. If those people like to talk about tacos, that's the community, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if I go, if I have a dentist appointment and I go to my dentist and he says you have a cavity, I wouldn't go to your house to get my cavity filled. I would go to the dentist. But if the dentist says you need to have better dental hygiene so that you don't get these cavities, that might be like, okay, well, that could be a community. If it was a dental hygiene community, for example, you could say, all right, Shaunna, I'm gonna brush and I'm gonna floss tonight, and I'm gonna let you know when I do it.
I
So,
need you to hold me accountable.
right. Like, okay, I did it 7 days, I did it all week, or I missed one day, I'm going to do better tomorrow. And then I'll check in on you and you're going to tell me how you're doing. Yeah. So that kind of thing, where it's like things that we want to do together that we want support with. Like taxes, no, you're going to go to your accountant for taxes. We don't have a community that, unless you're all learning to be an accountant or something, but
Right. Right.
there's just different instances where community makes sense.
Yeah. No, that was a great answer. That was a great answer. Okay. So if you look at your life specifically and kind of the path you've taken, I don't know about you, but mine was not a straight shot. It was more like this meandering roundabout thing. But when you think about what's next for you, what do you now believe is possible for your own life?
That's a good one. So I will say when I quit my corporate job in 2020, I planned to do travel writing. I had been building a business of travel writing over from 2018 to 2020. And I had been pitching editors in March that week. And then my editor was saying I was working on a story that was about to get published. And he was like, we're going to hold it because there's this thing happening. And that thing ended up being the pandemic.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when the pandemic happened and everybody stopped traveling, I'm like, I guess I'm not going to be a travel writer.
At
Guess
least not for
that's
a
not my thing
while.
anymore. So that alone ended up pivoting me into this community. And from the community, I launched a community to help people find calm in daily life. I ended up launching in June 20th, which was just happened to be the same week as the Black Lives Matter movement was happening, as well as the pandemic. So there was so much other stuff going on. And then I ended up failing my launch. And I learned so much from all these different things.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, I'll just keep doing it for free and I'll just keep figuring it out. And in the meantime, I ended up taking a course with Mighty that with a bunch of people to learn about community design online. And after the 5 week course, people said, hey, do you want to meet? Do you want to keep meeting to talk about community? And I was like, well, I can host it because I was kind of ahead of people in setting up my stuff. And I was like, I can host it in my community. Well, we ended up meeting for 6 months
Oh, wow.
and every week. And finally, they were like, Deb, you should probably get paid to do this stuff. You seem like you know a lot. And so I had no idea 4 years ago that I was going to be a consultant. I didn't even know what consultants did or how it worked, and I figured out that whole process. So I feel like those things, I never would have thought that I would have a podcast. I never would have thought that I wanted to write a book, but having written a book by 43, I never would have thought I was like, oh, that's when I'm older, when I have my life figured out.
Yeah, yeah.
And it turns out that I learned that my life is never going to be figured out because everything constantly is changing. And so what I would say is, I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I keep learning to build more confidence in myself and to trust myself more, which is what I'm really working on right now, is trusting that I have everything that I need and that
Yep.
everything will be okay.
Yes.
Because that is the hardest thing to do when you've got, people promoting courses all the time and people saying things all the time. If you get the right coach, if you get this, your business will get to 6 figures if you do this thing. And there's just so many distractions that get in the way
Yes.
of me trusting myself.
Yes. Yeah. When I'm talking to new entrepreneurs, I will remind them that there is no limit to the number of bright, shiny objects that you're going to be like seeing and shoved in your path. Everybody has the solution. If you want to know about SEO, you could ask 5 experts on SEO, and you'll probably get 5 different versions of here are the must do steps. And so I feel like a lot of being an entrepreneur is learning how to trust that you know what you're doing. You got to connect back to, I know why I'm doing this and what is important to my ideal client. And I think that also is, just on a personal level, making decisions. Like, I help women after divorce. So just putting your life back together after your marriage has ended is this huge lesson in trusting yourself and that you know how to take care of yourself and take care of your children, and you will figure it out, and it does work out. And yeah, so that whole, I feel like that's all I really do is teach people how to trust themselves.
It's a hard thing to do.
Because my
Especially,
favorite is when you say, I don't know. And I'm like, yes, you do.
that's the beginning.
Yes.
That's what I learned from a coach a long time ago, is the I don't know is the beginning of whatever. So
Yes.
asking the question instead of like period, I don't know, period, saying I don't know, question mark, and then thinking openly, okay, how can I open up to be curious about
Yes.
what is or what could be?
Yes.
Everything is possible. It definitely takes way longer than anyone ever thinks. We're always like, the first year, I'll get through the first year, and then everything will be great. I'll get through the
Yes.
second year, then everything will be great. I'll
Yes.
get through the third year.
Yes.
It's going to be great. And it's just constantly like, then something else happens, then something
Yeah.
else happens.
It's
So,
true.
and I know I'm talking in the future to people now because we're
Yeah. Yeah.
talking about how you're not going to share this until for a while yet. But either way, the message are the same.
It's the same.
It's always a good time to hear, Deb, trust yourself.
Yeah.
It's always that good time.
100%. 100%. Well, listen, I have loved this conversation and I'm sure, has added value to my listeners. But how can people find you when they want to connect after this show?
So findcalmhere.com is the website where my hub is. The podcast is there. The book is there. There's information about my services there. And there's a lot of great blog posts and resources on there. So I also have for the book, I have a companion workbook that's a free PDF download. So if
That's
you go
awesome.
to the website, they'll be able to get that there too. Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, I love it. This conversation has been so fun. I love when my guests give me questions for me to go do some homework and figure out like, oh, okay. So this has been really fun. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And I hope you have a, community that thrives and that brings you energy and also brings other people energy and joy and connect.
Yes, I love it. Hey, one last thing before you go. Don't forget to grab your free guide to get your next chapter started today. Let's make this pipe dream of yours this year's reality. Pop on over to shaunalee.com/start again to grab your free guide.